Trump administration is quickly working to mitigate the fallout of a security leak involving several of the nation's top intelligence officials. Yesterday, Jeff Goldberg, the editor-in-chief at The Atlantic, revealed he was included in a group chat on the open-source encrypted messaging app Signal about sensitive plans to bomb Houthi targets in Yemen. The chat reportedly included Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, along with several other key members of the Trump cabinet. According to the article, Goldberg says the members of the chat discussed sensitive plans, matters of national security, and some classified information regarding the impending strikes, even celebratory emojis after the strikes were carried out. At a Senate intelligence hearing today, Democratic lawmakers grilled some of the Trump administration's top intelligence officials in the aftermath of the leak.
Putting aside for a moment that classified information should never be discussed over an unclassified system. It's also just mind-boggling to me that all these senior folks were on this line and nobody bothered to even check. Security Hygiene 101. Who are all the names? Who are they? Well, it apparently included a journalist.
The National Security Council said the messages seem to be authentic in a statement to CBS News, but some members of the Trump administration are denying its legitimacy, claiming there was no classified information in the chat. Our Eleanor Watson was traveling with the defense secretary yesterday and asked him about it.
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again. Nobody was texting war plans, and that's all I have to say about that.
Let's bring in CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. So, Ed, how is the president reacting?
Well, we know that he has, at least so far, expressed support for those involved. Privately, we are expecting to hear from him later this hour. The White House says he's going to hold a meeting with U.S. ambassadors. It's unclear if these are the people he has nominated and who are yet to be confirmed or the ones that have been confirmed. But we are going to hear from him later this hour, towards the end of the hour. Earlier today, he told another network he has confidence in Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor. In his view, the actual airstrikes against the Houthis were conducted successfully. Nobody was hurt because of the release of this information to a reporter. And as far as the president's concerned, it's not a big deal. There is certainly plenty of finger pointing and dramatics behind the scenes. But the White House is essentially telling allies and aides to withhold any public criticism so as to maintain a public projection of unity. The president himself upset with Waltz about what happened, but again, trying to publicly suggest that there's something to have been learned from this, and the hope is that they'll move on. Watch especially how the president himself reacts to the news of this. Remember, yesterday he was asked about it and immediately discredited the information source, The Atlantic, which was a signal to us that he knew exactly what had happened and was doing what he often does in these situations by trying to discredit or diminish the source of the information. Let's see today, as we've seen from the White House so far today, how they explain this. And remember, there was that congressional hearing, the Senate Worldwide Threats hearing, where you had the CIA director and the director of national intelligence confirm that they were on this chat, claim again that there was no classified information shared, but not explain why that is or why in their interpretation it wasn't, since Jeffrey Goldberg has suggested otherwise. Either way, admitting it happened, but not necessarily showing much remorse for the mistake either. That may be in part because it wasn't John Ratcliffe or Tulsi Gabbard that started the conversation. It appears to have been Michael Waltz.
We'll talk more about the hearing in a moment with Nikole Killion, but Ed, Goldberg reported that the account named J.D. Vance in the text thread voiced concern over the strikes, calling them a mistake and that it would constitute bailing out Europe, effectively questioning the president's decision-making here. Can you explain that, why it would be seen as a benefit to Europe, and also any tension that we're seeing now between the president and vice president over this leak?
Well, the vice president's office has clarified since the article was published in response to it that the vice president stands with him and is in total agreement on the decision to carry out the airstrikes, that the two of them have talked about this. It is not uncommon for what we saw in this text chain to happen either verbally or otherwise ahead of a major military operation. And you can go back to Vice President Dick Cheney and Vice President Joe Biden, who would have raised questions or concerns in similar meetings, usually in person, not over Signal, about whether or not it made sense to do certain things with the U.S. military and how it might be perceived by the world or domestically. So what J.D. Vance appeared to be doing in these messages is in line with what many of his predecessors have done. Raise some questions in internal deliberations before a decision is made, and then it's publicly explained and conveyed. And so perhaps one of the more refreshing parts of this article is that it revealed that there were, in fact, substantive conversations going on regarding the operation, how the world would respond, and how it would be explained to the American people. Best we can tell, that's what usually goes on, administration to administration, when people like this are discussing these kinds of things. The difference is it isn't discussed over a encrypted messaging service that isn't necessarily completely protected from foreign spying or interference. And the moment that kind of conversation begins, or some experts say, that becomes a classified conversation that should absolutely not be exposed to a reporter, let alone discussed over a chat group.
Ed O'Keefe, thank you for your reporting. 18 participants were involved in the text thread, which happened, as we've been reporting, on the non-government approved messaging app Signal. It is strictly forbidden to share classified information on an unclassified system. Earlier, Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster discussed the concerns this is raising about national security.
Our adversaries, they're all over us, Vlad. They're trying to get into your systems through encryption, break encryption like this, but also, onto hardware. So it's really important to have, secure communications facilities when you're discussing, these top secret, most sensitive issues. And I think what happened here is they traded off security for convenience. You just can't do that.
The Senate Select Committee on Intelligence was already set to hold today's hearing on the annual worldwide threat assessment before the leaked group chat came to light. CBS News Congressional correspondent Nikole Killion is on Capitol Hill. Nikole, how did intelligence leaders respond to lawmakers at this hearing?
Well, there was a lot of dodging, but more or less they defended their actions. In fact, the CIA director, John Ratcliffe, said that, they were permitted to use a Signal, that it was on his government phone. At the same time, they kind of gave varying answers as to whether or not the information they were discussing over that chat was classified. At one point, Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, was asked point blank if, the information that was shared was classified. She kind of deferred to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, but the senator questioning her, Angus King, was like, but you're the head of intelligence, the director of national intelligence. That's something that you should know. And there was also certainly a lot on the part of Democrats in terms of trying to hammer these intelligence officials. Most notably, there was one exchange, for instance, with Georgia Senator Ossoff, who asked whether or not this was a big mistake to use a text chat like this, to which CIA Director John Ratcliffe said no. But then Ossoff was like, well, how is it not a big mistake if you have a political reporter on a text chain with officials at this level? So there were a lot of heated, contentious moments, if you will. Like I said, most of that coming from questioning from Democrats, many of whom are now calling for a congressional investigation into this security breach. But for now, we know that the senators are meeting in closed session with these officials. What, if anything, may come from it remains to be seen.
And House Judiciary Chair Jim Jordan says he's talked to President Trump about how his committee will seek ways to rein in so-called activist judges in a hearing next week. What impact might that have on the president's ongoing legal fights?
Well, look, as we have seen many times, obviously, there are many congressional Republicans here on Capitol Hill who feel that the president has been unfairly maligned with respect to the judicial system, that it's been at times weaponized against him, although certainly Democrats have argued counter to that. But in light of some of these contentious court battles, most notably this one over deportation flights, there have been some resolutions introduced, for instance, to impeach Judge Boasberg, who has been part of those proceedings. There have also been other pieces of legislation introduced to curtail national or federal injunctions. So basically what Jim Jordan is saying is, look, we're not taking any options off the table. We want to kind of explore what options may be before us to rein in his view, in House Republicans' view, these so-called activist judges. But Democrats, for their part, feel that this may be a slippery slope, may be going too far, particularly anyone who is proposing impeachment. Leader Hakeem Jeffries made clear the other day that, in his view, that's simply not happening.
Nikole Killion, thank you.